Calling this meeting of the Public Services Committee, December 11th, to order. The first item on our agenda is review and approval of minutes dated October 9th, 2012.
Move approval, Aguilar.
Second, Erpenbach.
With all the, okay, excuse me. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, and that does pass. Our agenda item today will be Project Trim, and we will lead off with Don Kearney, the Director of Parks and Recreations. And Mr. Kearney?
Good evening, I guess now instead of
If you could excuse me just for a minute. Just for those watching today, we are experiencing a failure with the audio-visual component at the Carnegie Town Hall. As a result, web streaming may not be available for today's meetings. You can watch the meeting live on CityLink. Thank you.
Good evening, Public Services Committee, City Council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Recreation. We have a presentation for you today just to talk a little bit about the background on Project Trim, remind everybody that may be somewhat new to the program, how it all works, why we implemented the program, and then I think the idea would be just to be able to answer questions, have some dialogue about the program, if there's suggestions for improvement. Obviously, we're here to listen to that, but this program predates me just a little bit, and so I'm going to have Kelby Maris, our Park Operations Manager, tell you a little bit about the history and where we're at today, and then obviously want to answer any questions you have. So, Kelby?
Good evening. Kelby Maris with Parks and Recreation. The first year of Project Trim actually happened in the year 2005. That was the very first time we did it. But there were 2 years prior to that, in 2003 and 2004, we did pilot projects in conjunction with Project Nice and Keep. The theory behind Project Trim is a proactive approach towards code enforcement. Prior to 2005, all of the code enforcement issues for tree heights over streets and sidewalks was done solely on a complaint basis. And in 2001, we experienced over 700 complaints of low-hanging branches over streets and sidewalks. And so that's really what started the ball rolling and trying to figure out a better way to do this. And the proactive approach of Project Trim then came up. So in 2003 and 2004, we went into the Project Nice and Keep areas, did a survey of all the trees, the street trees, and the tree branches that were low-hanging over streets and sidewalks, and then sent letters out to all of the abutting property owners, letting them know that they had trees that were not in compliance with the ordinance, and gave them a time frame within Project Nice and Keep to take care of that issue. And then, of course, in conjunction with Nice and Keep, we would then also pick up the branches that they had and haul them away. What we found in those first two pilot project years is that we got a little over 90% of the people that actually complied with it and did the tree trimming, left the branches for us, but then there were people, of course, who didn't. And so then we went ahead and trimmed those trees and brought them into compliance with the ordinance. And so then after those 2 years, we decided, with the level of cooperation that we're getting in these neighborhoods, we think that it's something that we can manage. We can take over this proactive approach and implement it citywide, and to bring all of the street trees within compliance with the ordinance. So then we've divided the city into 5 different forestry districts, and within those districts there are 3 different forestry sections. We pick 3 different times of the year in which we do our street tree survey, and during that survey we'll do just a third of that forestry district and send the letters out to all of those abutting property owners who have trees that are in violation of the ordinance, and give them about a 6-week window in which they can bring those trees into compliance, and then we'll go back out and do a reinspection. And as the project the program has evolved, we have gone to leaving blue notes in their doors when they need some additional trimming, because that was one of the first questions we were getting right out of the gate was, well, what if I trim my tree and it's not good enough? Well, we don't want, it's a proactive approach for the health of our urban forest, and it's not meant to be, to penalize anybody whatsoever. So we've come up with these blue notes that we leave in the door with a whole lot more information on which tree it is, where it might be on their lot, what exactly the issue is. And now we've gotten to the point where we will actually paint some of the branches and say, this is the one we're talking about. So this is the branch that's out of compliance, and this is the one that needs to be removed. So we're now on our second trip around the city, so it's getting to the point where we're not finding those really large limbs that need to come off anymore. It's smaller stuff, but as the city continues to grow, 5 years ago, some of these neighborhoods had small trees. Well, now the trees, they're 5 years older, they're larger, they've got some issues that need to be addressed as far as low-hanging branches go. Through the history of Project Trim, we're seeing over a 96% compliance rate with all of the letters that we send out. And we'll send out over 6,000 letters in a year for the notice of violation of trees out of compliance. Along with the letter, we send information on proper pruning techniques, what the branch-free zones are. The ordinance heights are 12 feet or 16 feet over the street, depending on whether it's an arterial or collector or residential street, and 10 feet over the sidewalk. One of the things that we stress about these branch-free zones, or it does not include the parking strip. So the grass area between the sidewalk and the curb, you don't have to trim your tree up 12 feet from the ground. And actually, that's not good practice, because like I mentioned, some of these smaller trees, we were getting some people who had a tree that was 17 feet tall, and they'd prune every branch on it up 12 feet. And it's just not good. It's not good for the tree. It doesn't look good anymore. And it's really not the goal of the program either. So the educational pieces that we've developed show these branch-free zones. And early on, we held public meetings and would explain the branch-free zones to the people that did attend. And basically, we want to be able to take a box, it's 12 feet tall, and push it down the street and have it not touch a tree branch. That's ultimately the goal, because things like snowplows, street sweepers, moving trucks, all of these vehicles that frequent our streets are hitting the trees, and they're not only causing property damage, but they're also making a wound on the tree, which then impacts the health of the tree. Through this process, though, of course, we focus on 1/5 of the city every year. We still do receive a few complaints from time to time about low-hanging branches, but those have whittled down to in the neighborhood of about 100 complaints a year. And those typically are in the area in which we're going to the next year. So as we move clockwise around the city, our complaints just forward, our complaints are just in front of our program by about a year. So, but like I said, it's only a few complaints, and it's a whole lot easier for us to manage that way. That's a real quick history of Project Trim and how it was developed, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kelby. Questions from the committee? Councilman Karski?
The ladies first.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Would you explain the branch-free zones again?
Sure. Basically, from the edge of the curb where it meets the street down in the gutter pan, up 12 feet or 16 feet if it's on an arterial street, all the way across the street at the same height above the street, so 12 or 16 feet all the way across to the curb line on the other side, and then back down, so that it's we understand that that streets have a crown in them for drainage. So 16 feet or 12 feet at the curb and 12 feet at the middle of the street, I mean, it's gonna have a bit of an arc to it. It's gonna follow the contour of the street. So branches that start maybe 20 feet up in a tree that reach down and out into the middle of the street and hang below that branch-free zone, we want those branches removed as well, so that there is a complete area 12 feet above the street all the way across from gutter to gutter that's completely free of branches.
Please.
Why don't we indicate in that letter which trees are not in compliance?
The way our survey is conducted is we have two of our forestry crew get in one of our high rangers, which is a bucket truck, and they'll drive the streets. And they'll say that one's out of compliance, and they'll read off the address, and it's a drive-by inspection. I mean, it's very quick. We're not walking down the street with a measuring stick to see which one it is. So and as we go by, we'll see, one tree is out of compliance, but the property's got 6. Well, that property automatically gets a letter. And that process is very fast as far as being able to get through the area for the inspection.
Councilor Aguilar, go ahead.
I did receive a letter 2 years ago, and I honestly didn't know which trees weren't in compliance. And I think I'm fairly reasonable. I guess that I don't recall anything about the Blue Notes implementation. I was new on the council at the time. I wanted to make sure that I was in compliance, and I had no idea after I hired someone to do it whether I actually was or not. So how long have you had the Blue Notes? And, I think that, you said there was some education about this in the beginning. How long has it been since there's been any citizen education on the project itself?
With the letters, we send out brochures that help with the branch-free zones and proper pruning techniques. We also send out a list of certified arborists. The Blue Notes are for anybody who needs, that their trees need more attention, that they didn't quite get it done. So if you get a letter and you trim your trees and you never hear anything else from us, you're good. But the Blue Notes go into the doors of the properties in which more pruning is needed.
But how am I supposed to know that that would be indicated as a citizen? That if you don't do it well enough, that you are going to have another chance? Is that in the letter?
Yeah, it is. It has been added to the letter.
Recently, or?
I'd have to ask Dwayne.
Good evening, Public Service Committee. My name is Dwayne Stahl. I'm the City Forester with Parks and Recreation. As Kelby mentioned before, this program has evolved over time, and it's questions like those that we look at and try to figure out a way to address it. And yes, the letter has been modified throughout the years. I don't know exactly which year we put that in, but it is a question that they're very concerned. They want to do it right. So they'll give us a call and ask if their property has been approved. So what we did to help alleviate some of that anxiety is to put that in the letter. I believe it's in bold, if it's not in red, that if additional trimming is needed, that we will leave a note in your door, and we will not take any further action until you've been notified. So
Thank
that's
you.
our notification. Thank you.
Mr. Karski?
Okay, Kelby, 2 questions, and the first one really has 2 parts. Tell me about, and I'm going to ask them at the same time, so tell me about the resources that people that we have going out there and doing these inspections, what kind of equipment they're riding in, what they're taking about with them as they do it, personnel, equipment, et cetera. And then, and this question gets asked to me frequently, we're sending these people out to inspect. And they say I got one little branch out of compliance. Why didn't they just cut it down for me while they were here? It seems like a terrible waste of, city time and equipment and people that they just tell me I need to do this. When they were there, they saw it, they could have done it themselves.
Right. The survey is conducted in a high ranger. The bucket of each of our high rangers extends above 11 feet. So if we're driving down the street and the tree limbs are hitting the bucket, those are automatic. We know that they're below 12. It's an automatic letter to the address.
Okay, how many are driving in that truck?
There's two people in the truck. There's one driving the truck, and then there's one marking off the addresses as they go. That this one's out of compliance. This one's out of compliance. When we come back to do our reinspection, and well, this property was out of compliance, and so they get out of the truck and they can obviously see that no trimming has been done whatsoever, and there's a tree branch that's as big around as my finger. A lot of those disappear, and the property is now in compliance, and we go on down the road, and the homeowner's never notified. I mean, so it does happen that once in a while those guys will, it's just one, they'll just reach up and snip it off, and it's done, and away they go. But as we go through our program, it's an educational piece that the trees are the responsibility of those abutting property owners. And so if there is something out of compliance, we feel that they need to be educated as to what the ordinances say, because they may not know that it needs to be 12 feet above the street until they get a letter. And then the measuring device they use, I thought, yeah, that's it, so it's fine, and we never hear from them, and it's that one little branch, and yeah, we snip it off and go on about our business. But at the same time, there's got to be, we've got to have a threshold there. If it's one branch, well, what is one small tree branch to me might not be to somebody else. It might be a big branch that, it's only 2 inches around. Well, if it's 4 inches around, I don't have the tools in my house to take care of that easily. So, it's kind of a judgment call on their part when we get to that point.
We have 5 divisions, 3 or 5 forestry divisions, and 3 within each division, you said? Mm-hmm. And how many times, we're doing this once a year, twice a year, so how many hours are we putting into just inspecting trees like this?
We will put in about 960 hours in a year, and that's to do our inspections 3 times. Mm-hmm. We'll do one early in the year, one in the summer, and then one late in the fall. So, and that makes it a manageable piece for us to be able to send out the letters, to answer some questions, and to go back and make sure that things are in compliance, and do the trimming that is necessary for us to do. So it's in those 3 different times of the year where those pieces of each forestry district are then done, but it's about 960 hours a year total for the inspection process.
For the whole city, okay. And the last question, if I could, Counselor. You had mentioned that over the last few years, we've been very successful in getting most of the city into compliance with it. Do you see us going to, just for at least a period of time, maybe only doing this by complaint basis where people are driving, or maybe the snow plow is driving, or the garbage truck, or whatever might be, and basing it on that?
At this point, I don't see us recommending that, because trees grow, and especially in the newer parts of town where the trees are young and they've got these branches that are currently in compliance, as they grow out over the street, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then once there's a complaint, these branches can be 18 inches in diameter, and those are some of the branches that we never even got a complaint on, but through Project Trim have now come off. So, and making a wound that big on a tree is really not good for it. I've always, throughout my career, I've always looked at when you go to trim a tree, are you doing this to the tree, or are you doing it for the tree? And you should be doing it for the tree. So I think as long as we can maintain our 5-year cycle, will keep the urban forest in good health, and we won't have any of those issues down the road.
Thank you.
Councilor Aguilar?
Are we discouraging trees being planted in the boulevards?
No, we are not.
Are we, if we get a call from a citizen, he suggests certain trees that are better to be planted or should not be planted in the boulevard?
Yeah, we have an approved street tree guide. It's a brochure that we can mail to people, and we do mail to people. And also, when they contact us about planting trees in the right-of-way, we talk also about distance between trees, distances away from fire hydrants, distances away from traffic signs, street lights, driveways, to make sure that as the tree grows, it doesn't become a problem down the road as it grows, to cover up a stop sign or a street light or something else. So we do what we can to make sure that they're putting the tree in the place that'll give the tree the best chance for success.
Continue.
You said that in the past it was by complaint only, and then I take it that we did ask the homeowner initially to do the work, and if they didn't, then the city would do it. Was there a cost then associated? You said that the city would then collect the branches. They no longer do that, right?
We only collected the branches during Project Nice and Keep, and actually that's part of Nice and Keep. When Nice and Keep comes into your neighborhood and you trim up trees in the front yard, backyard, side, the city will remove those branches. And it was only then that we removed the branches when it was in conjunction with Project Nice and Keep. If the city does come out and we do the trimming, the charge is $150 an hour, minimum of 1 hour, and I can't remember the last time we charged anybody more than 1 hour for the service. But then once that's done, though, the tree is definitely in compliance.
So have we ever provided the service? I hear that Brookings provides the service for there, and I know we're much larger, but has the City of Sioux Falls ever provided the service at no cost to the homeowner?
Well, several years ago, and the history on that piece gets a little foggy from talking with former forestry supervisors, that yeah, years ago, the city did try to go out and and raise these branches up into compliance with the ordinances. However, we found very quickly that we can't keep up, and it's not a program then. If we can't get around the city in a reasonable amount of time to raise all these branches up, really we're just kind of out there, doing what little bit we can, but we're not really making an impact. So it's kind of a yes and a no answer. Yes, we have done some trimming, but no, we've never had the kind of program that like Brookings has, where they'll get through the city, or like our Project Trim now, where we get through the city on a proactive approach.
I have one more.
Continue.
This council has always been very concerned about costs to senior citizens on a limited income, and I know the cost that I had to pay an arborist in order to trim my trees. How do we handle that if the homeowner cannot afford to trim the trees, nor the $150 minimum that the city requires if they do it?
Well, we get various calls about people who tell us that either they can't afford it, they can't do it, and we help them try to find some avenues to where they can get the work done. We suggest family in town, neighbors, because the nice thing about Project Trim is when we go through the neighborhood, everybody on the street with a tree out of compliance got a letter. So everybody on the street then, with a tree like this, is gonna have to do some trimming. So maybe they can work together to get it done. Can they contact a civic organization, their church, anybody that can help them? And there's been some times where we get somebody says, I've really been down on my luck. My spouse lost their job, my mother-in-law passed away. It's just really hard time for us, and And we understand that there's, in life, that those things come up, and sometimes those situations are resolved, and the homeowners aren't charged anything for the service.
Thank you.
Councilor Erfenbach?
I just wanted to comment that, number one, I have been one of those property owners on a ladder in the back of the pickup truck with the long-handled saw. I did it. Because, it's the rule. But I have also, one of my questions too is that, because I've learned that I don't plant new trees in the boulevards because I don't want to deal with it. But if I'm going to, if I decide that I want to plant trees in the boulevard, is there a place online that I can find that list of street trees? Or is there a place that, how do I figure that out?
Yeah, that brochure is on our website. It's on the forestry tab on the Parks Department piece of the Sioux Falls website.
Okay. And I just want to make a comment because I see these trees in a neighborhood that I drive through often. There are no evergreens on that list. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No evergreens in the boulevard, please. You'll make a huge mess. It's a traffic issue, a safety issue. But I guess from my standpoint, as long as we're under this program, it works really well. It's much easier to walk the sidewalks now when the trees are out of the way. But just be informed as homeowners. And, if this program is going to change, well, that's one thing. But right now, this is the way that we're doing it, and it works well. For 96% of the people in town, it works pretty well. And so, I appreciate the work that the Parks Department does with it. I appreciate that it's taken in that sort of, piecemeal basis so that it's every 5 years. It makes the community look better, and it makes the trees healthier.
Councilman Karski?
Sorry about that. Has the city reached out to the retail providers of not evergreens, but trees, plants, et cetera? I've got a new neighbor down the street from me that just haven't even met them, and this fall they put in 2 maple trees on the boulevard, which I don't believe are encouraged to be planted on the boulevard. Have we worked with the retail providers to say, hey, let people know that they can't, or we do have ordinances against putting these things there?
We have. There's limited success. A lot of that goes to burdens on the purchaser. When I went and purchased the trees for my property, I basically told them what I was looking for, what I was after. Of course, I had some good knowledge to go on what I was looking for, but those people don't always tell the salesman at the nursery where they're going to plant the tree. We've provided that information to them, but also at the same time, they're in business, and they're in business to sell trees. So they do that, and they talk about the characteristics of the tree with the people, but I'm not exactly confident that if I walked in to any of the nurseries in town and said, I want to plant a green ash in the boulevard, that I couldn't get one. And we all know that shouldn't happen, but I'm not confident that it would.
Okay, any other questions from committee? I have a couple. Kelby, before Project Trim happened, before we started doing this with our forestry department, what was the mission of the forestry department at that time as far as interacting with our city streets and our citizens?
The forestry division has always been tasked with ordinance enforcement that were the responsibility of Parks and Recreation. Up until a couple of years ago, that also included nuisance vegetation. So the forestry division would work on that one as well. And actually, when I first started working for the city, the forestry division would go out and would actually mow the properties that needed to be mowed. Of course, that no longer happens, and we went away from that practice years ago. But forestry has always been, as far as being out in the public versus the parks, it's always been in that code enforcement, storm damage, street tree removal type setting. That's kind of been the mission. We've done an awful lot over the past 10 years to get to more of a public education piece, to try to put out as much information as we can, not only for street trees, but for private trees. People have questions about private trees, and we do what we can to answer some of those questions as well. But I hope I've answered your question as far as what.
Sure. And then taking a look at the difference between sending a truck out twice, sending out letters, to actually maybe trimming some of the branches that they are able to. Do we have any idea of what the cost difference is?
We have, over the last month or so, we've taken a good hard look at what it would take for the city to take over the responsibility of the street trees. Now, in doing that, we had to make some assumptions. One of which was that we would continue to keep the 5-year cycle. We would still get through the city in 5 years. So that being one. Another one being that we would have to really take a look at the number of properties that would basically be in violation of the ordinance. If the community knows that we're going to come and do it, the people that do it on a regular basis are going to discontinue that practice. They're not going to continue to take care of those trees like they do now. So the number of properties then that would need trimming, would need service, then goes up. And so once we figured that and comparing apples to apples, we've used that $150 an hour that we charge as a contract rate thing, and that's what a contractor would give us. And we use that because we've got storm damage contracts in place with licensed arborists to provide a service with a 3-person crew, bucket truck, chipper, and a chip truck. And that's the kind of, that's the crew size that we would use. So we use that $150 an hour, and it comes to just under $700,000 for a year to do a fifth of the city. And move that over to hiring additional staff for Parks and Recreation to do it. We're right about the same dollar amount. However, now we're going to have to buy additional equipment for these crews to use, additional chippers, additional high rangers, so that we can continue with that 5-year cycle and then increase into that number of properties that we anticipate then would need service.
Okay, and over the last, let's say, 10 years, as you've described, what has happened with the forestry department within the Parks Department? Has it increased in size, been reduced, the budget?
No. The forestry crew has actually grown by 2 members, and those 2 positions were in an effort to support Project Trim. Another part of Project Trim is that when we've got that 1/5 of the city, we go into every park in that 1/5 of the city and we trim those trees. But we're not only trimming them for ordinance height, we're looking at structural pruning, dead wooding, the stuff that needs to be done for the tree. So we're doing that piece as well. But those two positions are what provided us with 2 3-person crews, so that we've got one that can be on the streets and we've got one that can be in the parks. The crews are adequately and safely staffed.
Councilman Urfenbach?
I do have one other thought about this, because I know we've bounced around this idea of taking that over, and I'm listening to the costs involved in just trimming trees. It's an amazing amount of money. But then the other piece of it for me is that if we're going to decide that the city is going to trim those trees, then we also have to decide that the city is going to dictate what can be planted and what can't be planted. And so that, to me, creates another ordinance and more regulations in terms of, there's absolutely no way I can plant that. If I want to plant a silver maple, I can plant a silver maple, but I better keep it trimmed. But if the city is going to trim that tree for me and I plant a silver maple, they're going to cut it down, because it's not acceptable. And so to me, that creates a whole nother layer of disagreement between the city and the landowner. Let's just say it's nicer to plant a smaller tree and it looks really pretty, and you need to keep it trimmed to this, and we'll check it for you every once in a while, rather than creating this whole other layer of ick in terms of that relationship. I just can't imagine how we would deal with that. I just can't see it. And when you talk about the numbers you're talking about, that just blows it out of the water for me. System works. It's not broken.
Right now, as it stands, Kelby, if somebody, as Councilman Karski stated, plants a tree that is not on our list, do they get a blue card, or Do we say anything to them, or we just let the tree grow?
No, we just let the tree grow. We're not actively pursuing those trees that we would not allow to be planted if it were our program.
Any other questions, comments? Any motions on, guess I would like to make a suggestion that we have project trims directors or the Parks Department make a presentation at maybe an informational, showing the cost differences of what we do now compared to what could happen if we were actually to take it over. I think that's something that the council was looking for when they sent that here to us. Councilman
I'd
Aguilar?
also like to request copies of the current letter. We can see the brochure online, but I don't believe can we see the letter online?
I don't believe the letter's online. but we
Yeah,
can
I'd
get
like
you
to
a copy.
see a copy of the current letter and the blue note.
Certainly.
Any other comments?
If I could just ask then, if we're going to put it on an informational session, are we going to make some kind of recommendation on a committee would be my first question. And then my second question would be, should it be closer to budget time? Should we kind of roll this into other conversations we're having? Just questioning, Council.
Councilman Aguilar?
I think that part of this came up because of the Marion Road project, when, there was the concern by counselors, other than I think the four of us, about the way that was handled with the tree trimming. So.
Could you restate that, explain that, what happened with Marion Road?
They had finished the road project from, I think it was Counselor Jameson that brought it up. Do you remember, Counselor Anderson?
I also got a phone call on that, is that I believe that area was surveyed about the same time they were doing the construction. And there was a lot of confusion on what trees were supposed to be trimmed, and at that time, there wasn't even sidewalks. So I think there was a lot of confusion there, and a lot of complaints came out of that construction project.
So I believe that somehow we have to take something back to the council as a whole. What? I'm not sure.
Well, if the issue is communications between Public Works and Parks, that's really not up to us. That's an administration issue. We can't dictate that Kelby talks to Mark's crew, Obviously, it makes more sense that if we're doing reconstruction there and we've got big trucks in there, maybe we should trim those trees while we're there, but maybe we should hold off on surveying that area if it's all under construction.
Right, I think that was the point that the counselors were making at that time, because they did get a number of complaints.
And also, there were questions from citizens that wanted to know why we were not trimming our trees in the boulevards and in those mediums. So I think that a cost analysis, just a basic one, would be something good to show to the public. And then we could discuss any changes, whether it's to the letter or the program itself, as a full council. One other question. With the Russell Avenue construction project, I was working with Mark Cotter on that, and I had requested that we survey the trees that are in the boulevards along Russell Avenue, because I think there's about 80 to 90 of those trees. And I wanted to see what the cost analysis would be to remove those trees and plant whatever ones were acceptable to be removed and replant them in other locations. And I had heard that we were going to be looking at that. Do we have any updates on that?
Yeah, I think I'll let Dwayne address that one.
Thank you.
Yes, we did have some conversations about that. A majority of those trees were ash trees, green ash, and the cost to move them somewhere else, I didn't want them in my parks, actually. They're not very good quality trees. There were some older crabapple trees. Basically, they're at a point where they're not recommended to be moved. They're too big. There were some Kentucky coffee trees that were planted in the early 2000s that have some value, and those basically were the only trees that I recommended that we try to incorporate into the project.
And are they going to be removed then with your recommendation, or is there something we have to do further on that?
The existing trees to be removed in the project, or the
Correct.
ones that we want to keep?
Well, the ones that you want to take out of there.
Yeah, well, we're going to incorporate them in the project to keep them there. That was
Keep 'em
the
right
last
there?
conversation that I had.
Okay, because the conversations I had, those boulevards were going to be completely removed.
Right. They were redesigning it's the entrance into Western Avenue off of Russell. They were going to redesign that median to keep those trees. If the worst-case scenario, they could be lifted, redesigned, and then put back. But those would be worth keeping.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the committee? A motion?
Move to adjourn.
How about to move this, send this to an informational?
I don't see,
I don't see the need to send it to an
I
informational.
don't get it. I don't see that need. You know, I mean, there's tons of information out there. You know, you can get on the website if you have concerns about it. I mean, there's clearly a miscommunication thing with Marion Road, and maybe it happens in other places too. Staff needs to pull it together for that, but I don't see this being raised to another level, unless
Well,
I'm missing something.
Okay, then we have asked a couple questions that they are going to have to furnish answers for.
Didn't this come to us, though, because of public input and because of concerns during an informational expressed by council members?
I think that was.
And that's why I think it was assigned to public services.
So now we've gone through it as public services, and now we're going to ship it back there for what purpose? I mean, that's where I'm getting at is what's our recommendation then? If we're going back to full council, why? What's the purpose?
Well, I think number one, we should look at that letter. I think that the first letter that's issued out that does not dictate what trees, you know, what area, northeast, northwest corner of your lot, there could be some amendments done there.
Then I would move that we ask for those things to happen in another committee meeting, but not to go to full council. That just doesn't seem like wise use of
Start
our
there.
time.
Yeah.
That's my motion.
Second.
All in favor, say?
Aye.
Okay, then we will work with Parks Department to try to correct those things. Thank you.
Then I would move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say?
Aye.
Aye.
It's adjourned. Thank you.